You don't belong here. I need you to leave this building right now." Amara Steele had not yet fully set her bag down on the polished marble floor when the words reached her. She had just pushed through the revolving glass door of the Grand Meridian Hotel in Dallas. A 22-hour stretch of travel pressing against her shoulders. A red-eye from Seattle. A layover in Phoenix. A car service that had gotten lost twice on the way from the airport. She was wearing a gray hoodie, dark jeans, and the same worn sneakers she kept specifically for travel days, because comfort had always mattered more to her than performance when no one she needed to impress was watching. Her carry-on was modest. There were no lanyards, no designer logos, nothing to announce that the woman standing in that lobby had personally written the code that made this hotel's entire digital check-in system function. A decade ago, back when the Grand Meridian's parent company had hired her startup for what they had privately called a low-risk experiment. The man who had spoken was standing behind the concierge desk, but had stepped forward now, moving with the stiff deliberateness of someone who had decided something before the conversation had even begun. His name badge read Brannon Ketch, guest Screffus manager, and he had transferred to this property only 3 weeks earlier. He had not attended the Tech Forward Summit orientation briefing. He had not looked at the printed speaker packet sitting in the employee lounge since Tuesday. What he had done in the 6 seconds between spotting Amara walk through the door and opening his mouth was make a decision entirely without evidence. A woman in a hoodie and sneakers, no visible badge, carrying a single bag, walking through a lobby full of men and women in pressed blazers and conference lanyards. The picture did not fit the frame he had built for it, and he had acted on that mismatch without a second thought. Amara looked at him, not with alarm, not with the reflexive apology some part of him may have expected. She looked at him the way a person looks at something they recognize, something they have seen before, cataloged before, understood before, even when it still stings. She told him calmly that she was a registered guest and a speaker at the conference, that her name was on the program, that she had a reservation confirmed 3 weeks prior, and that she would be happy to pull up the confirmation if he would give her 30 seconds to find it on her phone. Brandon cut her off before she finished. His voice had already gone several degrees colder, the way voices do when someone has already decided the outcome and is no longer genuinely listening. He told her that this floor was restricted during the conference. He told her that registered attendees were required to have their badges visible at all times, and that without one, he would need her to proceed to the service entrance on the east side of the building, where the catering staff checked in each morning. The lobby was not quiet. There were several hundred people moving through it. Conference attendees from 41 states and 9 countries, executives and engineers, and investors and journalists, all carrying the small square badges that dangled from their necks on lanyards printed with the Tech Forward logo. Several of them slowed as they passed, catching the tone of the exchange without yet understanding it fully. A few stopped altogether, arms folding, eyes moving between the woman in the hoodie and the manager, whose jaw was set in a way that suggested he had no intention of adjusting his position. Amara reached into her bag and produced her wallet. She removed her driver's license and placed it on the desk between them. Then she removed the confirmation email she had printed out of habit, a habit formed years ago, in a time when having documentation in hand was the only thing that made certain people take her seriously. The email carried her name, her room number, and her speaker designation printed in bold beneath the Tech Forward logo. Brandon glanced at both items with the practiced brevity of someone who has already decided that looking closely would only complicate a conclusion reached without looking at all. He slid the license back toward her. He told her that printed emails could be altered, that he would need to verify through the front desk system, and that in the meantime she would need to wait outside. Amara did not move outside. She stood where she was, her spine straight, her voice still measured, and asked to speak with whoever was overseeing guest operations for the conference that week. Brandon told her, with a small tight smile that carried no warmth whatsoever, that he was overseeing guest operations. He told her he had handled situations like this before. He did not elaborate on what he meant by situations like this, but the words arranged themselves in the air between them, in a way that required no further explanation from anyone paying attention. She reached for her phone to call Helena Price, the conference director, a woman with whom she had exchanged no fewer than 12 emails in the past month alone. Brandon moved before she could finish unlocking the screen. He stepped around the desk and placed his hand firmly on her arm. Not violently, but with the particular physical authority of someone who believes his body is an extension of institutional power, and told her that she was creating a disruption and that he was going to need security to escort her to the lobby exit for the comfort of the other guests. The lobby went noticeably quieter, not total silence, but the kind where conversations taper and footsteps slow, and people unconsciously turn toward the source of the wrongness to confirm what their instincts are already telling them. A young woman nearby, a software engineer from Atlanta, her badge reading conference attendee, first year, took 2 steps toward them and started to say something. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Brandon did not acknowledge her. 2 security guards arrived from the East Corridor within 90 seconds, moving with the efficiency of men who trusted the person who had called them without asking a single question first. One of them wrapped a hand around Amara's elbow. Not gentle, the kind of grip that assumes resistance before resistance has been offered. Amara went still. Not the stillness of someone frightened into compliance. The stillness of someone who has spent enough years in boardrooms and negotiating tables, and rooms where she was the only person who looked like her to understand that stillness itself can be the loudest possible response. She looked at the guard's hand on her arm. She looked up at the faces of the people, now watching openly from a lobby that had effectively stopped moving. And she said, quietly but with each syllable landing exactly where she intended, that this was going to matter. All of it. Every second of it. The security guard did not release her arm. And that was the moment Helena Price came through the conference corridor door. Helena had directed the Tech Forward Summit for 11 years. She had managed keynote cancellations, venue floods, and a speaker who had once arrived by helicopter 3 hours late. She was not easily rattled. The sight of Amara Steele standing in the lobby of the Grand Meridian with a security guard's hand on her arm rattled her completely. Helena crossed the lobby at a pace, as close to running, as professional dignity permitted, already speaking before she arrived. Her voice cutting through the ambient noise, with the precision of someone who understands that every second of delay compounds the damage. She told the guard to release her immediately. She told Brandon, whom she had met once, and had not found particularly impressive, that the woman he had just attempted to remove from the building was Amara Steele, that her name was printed on the banner currently hanging above the conference registration desk, visible from where they were all standing if any one of them had simply looked up. Brandon looked up. Above the registration desk, in letters 3 feet tall against a dark blue background, the banner read, Tech Forward Summit, Opening Keynote, Amara Steele, Founder and CEO, SteelPath Technologies. The color did not drain from his face so much as recede, a slow dawning recession, like a tide pulling back to reveal what was underneath. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at Helena. He looked at Amara. He looked at the banner. He looked at the guard, who had already released her arm and taken a step back with the quiet urgency of someone trying to become part of the wall. Amara did not look at the banner. She already knew what it said. She had approved the design herself 4 months ago, over a 20-minute call with the event's creative team while sitting in a parking garage in Seattle waiting for a meeting to begin. She looked at Brandon Ketch. She told him, in a voice that did not rise and did not shake, that she was not angry with him personally, that what he had done was not new to her, had never been new to her, and that she had spent too many years watching it happen to people who had far less recourse than she did to feel something as simple as personal anger about it now. She told him that the decision he had made in the 6 seconds, between seeing her walk through that door and deciding she did not belong, there was not going to disappear quietly, and that she intended to make sure of it. Then she picked up her bag, thanked Helena for her help, and asked if her room was ready, because she had a keynote address to prepare. The internal review opened within 48 hours. Video footage from 8 different lobby cameras was compiled by the hotel chain's corporate oversight team, who flew in from Houston by the following morning. Brandon's account, that he had been acting on an unauthorized entry alert, collapsed within the first hour of review when investigators confirmed that no such alert had been logged in the system at any point that evening. He revised his account twice before his representative arrived. Each revision moved slightly further from what the cameras had recorded with unblinking clarity. Amara delivered her keynote the following morning to an audience of 2,000 people who had heard, through the particular osmosis of conference culture, some version of what had happened in the lobby the night before. She did not mention it at the start of her talk. She spent the first 40 minutes on SteelPath's origins, the apartment in Cleveland where she had taught herself to code on a laptop her mother purchased at a pawnshop with 3 weeks of overtime wages. The church fellowship hall, where she had held her first investor meeting because she could not afford an office. The 13 rejection letters from venture capital firms that she kept framed at her headquarters, now, not as trophies, but as documentation. When she finally addressed the lobby, she did so without preamble and without theater. She said that what had happened to her the previous evening had happened because she was there to tell the story and because she had the resources to ensure it would not simply disappear. She said she understood that made her the exception, not the rule. She said that in her years of building SteelPath, she had hired from communities that looked like the community she had come from. Young engineers routinely passed over by firms that did not recognize them, because they did not fit the image those firms had built of what talent was supposed to look like. She said that every single one of those engineers had their own version of the lobby. Most of them had never been given a banner. The room was quiet in a way that large rooms rarely are, not politely quiet, actually quiet. She concluded by announcing that SteelPath was establishing the SteelPath Access Initiative, a funding and mentorship program for tech founders from underrepresented backgrounds, with an initial commitment of $40 million. She had planned to announce it at the end of the conference. She moved it to the beginning, she told the room, because the lobby had reminded her that timing was not something she should continue to leave to someone else's discretion. Brandon Ketch was terminated before the week was out. The hotel chain issued a formal written apology, not only to Amara, but published on their corporate website with language she had reviewed and approved before it went live, because she had insisted that a private apology served only the institution's comfort, not the public record. The chain launched a mandatory retraining program for all guest-facing management staff across 62 properties, built around a framework developed with input from civil rights organizations and reviewed by Amara's team before implementation. The young software engineer from Atlanta, the woman who had started to speak up and found her voice too small in the moment, sent a message to the conference organizers 2 days later asking how she could get involved with the Access Initiative. Helena forwarded it to Amara personally. Amara replied within the hour, not through an assistant, but from her own email address. They spoke by phone the following week. The engineer later said in an interview that the call had lasted 45 minutes and that Amara had spent most of it asking questions rather than talking. That had surprised her more than anything else about the entire week. Brandon, for his part, did not leave quietly so much as retreat into a silence he had not chosen. He had grown up being told that authority was straightforward, that the title, the institutional weight behind a decision, made the decision correct by definition. He had never examined that belief closely enough to notice how many assumptions it required in order to hold together. Losing his position did not dismantle those assumptions overnight. But something in him shifted slowly in the weeks that followed. A reluctance to act on the first conclusion that arrived, a habit of pausing that had not existed before. Whether that pause would grow into something more honest than mere caution was a question only time could answer. The Access Initiative received more than 800 applications in its first 3 weeks. SteelPath's board approved an expansion of the initial funding commitment the following quarter. Amara traveled to 6 cities that year to meet with cohort members in person, arriving each time in whatever she happened to be wearing. Jeans more often than not, and sitting across from people who had built something real out of almost nothing, the way she once had, listening to what they needed with the full weight of her attention. On a Wednesday morning in late November, she drove to a community center in South Dallas, where the initiative was hosting its first regional workshop. The parking lot was nearly full when she arrived, so she left her car at the far end and walked the length of the lot in the early morning cold, her hood pulled up against the wind. No assistant, no security, the same worn sneakers from the travel day. A young volunteer at the door, perhaps 22, his name written in marker on a handmade badge, held it open for her without recognizing who she was. He said good morning. She said good morning back. He asked if she was there for the workshop. She said yes. He handed her a blank name tag and a pen. She wrote her name in the small white space, capped the pen, and walked inside. The room was warm and already loud, with the particular energy of people who have found each other at exactly the right moment. She stood at the back for a while before anyone noticed she was there, watching the faces of people who were only just beginning to understand what they might one day build. She thought about a pawnshop laptop. She thought about a lobby. She thought about a banner with her name on it that a man with a title had never bothered to look up and read. Then someone across the room recognized her, and the noise shifted into something different entirely. And Amara Steele smiled. Not for the cameras that were not there, not for a headline that had not yet been written, but for the simple and private reason that this was exactly what she had meant when she said she was building something worth building. And she could see it now, assembled in the faces of the room around her, still unfinished, still fragile, and entirely possible.